Wyoming Territory, 1879. Wade Brennan had become the laughingstock of timber. Ridge 12 mail-order brides rejected in 2 years, each one deemed too delicate for his rough cattle ranch. Then Clara Hayes arrived with dirt under her fingernails, no shoes on her feet, and a willingness to work that shocked the entire town. Why would a successful rancher turn away beautiful, educated women only to choose the one everyone else overlooked? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The train platform at Timber Ridge was packed tighter than Clara Hayes had ever seen a public space. She pressed herself against the rough wooden wall of the station house, trying to make her battered carpetbag less visible, trying to make herself smaller in a crowd that clearly hadn't come for the mail or freight. They'd come for the show. That's her. A woman in a peacock blue dress whispered loudly to her companion, pointing with a gloved hand at a stunning blonde descending from the first-class car. Number 13. Poor thing doesn't know what she's walking into. Someone should warn her, another voice chimed in. Save her the humiliation and miss the entertainment. Martha, don't be cruel to the rest of us. Laughter rippled through the crowd, and Clara felt her stomach clench. She'd arrived on this same train, stepping down from the livestock car where she'd worked her passage from Kansas, mucking stalls and calming nervous horses for 3 days straight. She'd planned to find work in Timber Ridge, any work, cleaning, cooking, farm labor, anything to eat, and save enough to eventually reach Oregon where her brother had settled. But now, watching this elaborate scene unfold, Clara understood she'd stumbled into something else entirely. Something the whole town had turned out to witness. The blonde woman, her traveling suit was obviously expensive. Her boots polished to a mirror, Shine looked around with growing confusion at the crowd. She was beautiful in that porcelain doll way that made men stupid and women jealous. With perfect ringlets framing a heart-shaped face, Miss Victoria Ashworth. A man's voice cut through the murmurs. Deep, resigned, edged with something that might have been exhaustion. The crowd parted, and Clara finally saw him. Wade Brennan, she assumed the rancher everyone had been gossiping about during the train ride. He was tall, probably 6'2", with broad shoulders that came from actual work rather than tailoring. His face was weathered by sun and wind, making it hard to guess his age, somewhere between 30 and 40. Dark hair needed cutting, and his jaw was shadowed with several days of beard growth. He wore work clothes, canvas pants, a shirt that had been mended at the elbow, boots that had seen years of hard use. He looked uncomfortable in his own skin, like a man fulfilling an obligation he'd rather avoid. Mr. Brennan? Victoria's voice was cultured, Eastern. Oh, thank goodness. The journey was absolutely dreadful. I cannot wait to see your home and have a proper bath. She smiled, clearly expecting him to be charmed. Wade's expression didn't change. Train leave dust on your dress, Miss Ashworth. Victoria glanced down at her traveling suit, brushing at an invisible speck. Well, yes, I suppose so. The accommodations were rather, dust bothers you then. It wasn't really a question, but Victoria answered anyway, her smile faltering slightly. I wouldn't say bothers exactly. I simply prefer cleanliness, which any civilized person can't stand it, got it? Wade turned to a man beside him, his foreman, maybe, and said something too quiet for the crowd to hear. Then he looked back at Victoria. Miss Ashworth, I appreciate you making the journey. That took courage. But this isn't going to work. The platform went dead silent. Victoria blinked, her smile freezing in place. I'm sorry, what? You're not suited for ranch life. I can see it plain as day. Wade's voice wasn't cruel, just matter-of-fact, like he was commenting on the weather. Ranch is dusty, Miss Ashworth. Gets in everything, your clothes, your hair, your food. Wind blows it through every crack in the walls. You'd be miserable within a week. But we've only just met. Victoria's composure was cracking, color rising in her perfect cheeks. Surely you can't make such a judgment based on a single comment about dust. It's not just the dust. It's the way you said it, the way you're standing, the way you keep looking at your gloves like they might get dirty. Wade removed his hat, ran a hand through his hair, put it back on. I've done this 12 times now, Miss Ashworth. I know the signs. You're a city woman. Nothing wrong with that. But city women and cattle ranches don't mix. I learned that lesson at considerable expense. 12 times, someone in the crowd muttered. Unbelievable. Man's got standards, you have to give him that, another voice countered. Impossible standards, but standards. Victoria's face had gone from pink to red. Mr. Brennan, I assure you I'm quite capable of adapting to any circumstances. My letters made it very clear that I'm willing to. I'm sure you believe that. They all did. Wade pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. This is your return fare, plus extra for your trouble and lodging at the hotel until the next eastbound train. The Grand Hotel is decent clean sheets, good food. I'll have my foreman Jim here to make sure you're settled properly. He held out the money. Victoria stared at it like it was a snake. You're dismissing me, she said, her voice shaking now with humiliation and rage. In front of all these people. Like I'm some kind of livestock you're rejecting at auction. No, ma'am. Livestock I could use. You I can't. Wade's expression softened slightly. It's not personal, Miss Ashworth. You're probably a fine woman. Just not fine for this. Please take the money. For a moment, Clara thought Victoria might slap him. Her hand actually twitched toward his face. But then she snatched the envelope, turned on her polished heel, and walked toward the hotel with her spine so straight it looked painful. The crowd parted for her, and the whispers started immediately. 13, someone said gleefully. Unlucky number 13. Someone should tell the matrimonial agencies to stop sending candidates. Man's clearly not serious about finding a wife. Oh, he's serious. Just serious about finding someone who doesn't exist. Wade stood there for a moment, seeming to steel himself against the murmurs and stares. Then he settled his hat lower and started to walk away. Mr. Brennan. A woman's voice, sharp and disapproving. An older lady in severe black pushed through the crowd. This is absolutely disgraceful. That poor girl traveled all the way from Philadelphia, and you dismiss her over dust? Mrs. Fletcher. Wade's voice was respectful but firm. Appreciate your concern, but this is my business, not yours. It's the whole town's business when you keep wasting these women's time and money. Not to mention making Timber Ridge look like it's populated by backwards fools. Mrs. Fletcher planted herself in front of him. What exactly are you looking for, Mr. Brennan? A woman who doesn't mind being dirty? A woman with no standards? A woman who'll happily live in squalor? A woman who understands what ranch life actually is, Wade said quietly. Not what she imagines it to be from dime novels. Not some romantic notion. The real thing: hard work, long hours, dust, mud, sweat, and isolation. A woman who won't break when reality doesn't match her expectations. And you determine this in 5 minutes? I've gotten good at reading people, ma'am. Had to. Wade moved a step around her. Now if you'll excuse me, I've got cattle to tend. He walked away, his foreman Jim following, and the crowd gradually dispersed. Everyone talking at once about Wade Brennan's impossible standards and Victoria Ashworth's humiliation and whether number 14 would fare any better. Clara stayed pressed against the station wall, her mind racing. She'd witnessed something important, though she wasn't quite sure what. This man, this rancher who'd just rejected his 13th mail-order bride, he wasn't cruel. She'd seen cruel men, plenty of them. Her stepfather had been cruel. Her mother's second husband had been worse. Wade Brennan was something else. Desperate, maybe. Searching for something specific. tired of being disappointed, and utterly completely alone. "You waiting for someone, girl?" The station master had appeared beside her, eyeing her shabby dress and bare feet with obvious suspicion. "Or just loitering?" "Looking for work, sir," Clara said quickly. "I can clean, cook, mend, handle livestock. I'm strong and I don't complain. We don't have work for vagrants." His tone was dismissive. "Try the saloons. They're always looking for girls." The implication made Clara's face burn. "I'm not that kind of then keep moving. This is a respectable station." He made a shooing gesture like she was a stray dog. Clara grabbed her carpetbag and left the platform, her throat tight with familiar frustration. It was always like this. Her clothes were too shabby, her appearance too rough, her lack of shoes marking her as someone beneath notice. Never mind that she could work circles around most men. Never mind that she'd kept her family's failing farm running for 3 years after her father died, right up until the bank took it. Never mind that she'd survived things that would break those fancy ladies in their silk dresses. None of that mattered. In town, all that mattered was appearance, and Clara knew exactly what she looked like. Poor, desperate, forgettable. She walked down Timber Ridge's main street, studying the businesses. The general store, the bank, the hotel where Victoria Ashworth was probably crying into a lace handkerchief. The saloons, 3 of them, which seemed excessive for a town this size. The church, the doctor's office, the land office. And everywhere, people were still talking about Wade Brennan and his ridiculous standards. "Man's going to die alone on that ranch," someone said from the barbershop doorway. "Good riddance. Anyone that particular deserves loneliness," came the reply. Clara kept walking until the businesses thinned out and she found herself near the livery stable. The smell of horses and hay and manure was instantly comforting, familiar in a way nothing else in this strange town was. She hesitated, then walked into the dim interior. A man was shoeing a horse, his back to her. When he turned at the sound of her footsteps, she recognized him as Jim, Wade Brennan's foreman. "Help you?" he asked, not unkindly. "I'm looking for work," Clara said. "I'm good with horses. Can muck stalls, groom, help with shoeing if you need it. I don't need much, just meals and a place to sleep." Jim studied her for a long moment, taking in her bare feet, her work-roughened hands, the way she stood like someone used to physical labor. "You just come in on that train?" "Yes, sir." "From where?" "Kansas. Family farm went under. Heading to Oregon to find my brother, but I need to earn passage. You see that circus on the platform?" Clara nodded carefully. Jim went back to his shoeing, speaking while he worked. "Wade Brennan's not a bad man. I've known him for 8 years, worked for him for 6. He's fair, pays on time, treats his people right. But he's been cursed with bad luck when it comes to women." "Seems like he's cursing himself," Clara said before she could stop herself. Jim chuckled. "You'd think so, wouldn't you? But here's what folks don't know. First woman he brought out, this was 2 years ago, took one look at the ranch house and cried for 3 hours. Refused to even go inside. Said it was primitive and she'd rather die than live like a savage." Clara winced. Second one made it inside, but couldn't stand the isolation. Started having hysterics after 2 days, claiming the silence was driving her mad. Third one was horrified by the outhouse. Fourth one was terrified of the cattle. Fifth one refused to cook or clean because she was a lady, not a servant. Jim hammered a nail with more force than necessary. "Should I keep going?" "No, sir." "I understand, do you? Because here's the thing, Wade's not rich. He's got a working ranch, not a showplace. He needs a partner, not a decoration. Someone who understands that ranch life means work all day, every day, in all weather. Someone who won't fall apart when things get hard." Jim set down his hammer and looked at her directly. "He's learned to spot the ones who can't handle it, and he sends them home before they waste more time, theirs and his." "That makes sense." Clara said quietly. But it doesn't help me find work. No, I suppose it doesn't. Jim returned to his shoeing. Try Mrs. Chun at the boarding house. She sometimes needs help with laundry. Clara thanked him and left, but she didn't go to the boarding house. Instead, she found herself walking to the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open rangeland. She could see mountains in the distance, purple-blue against the afternoon sky. The wind was strong here, carrying the scent of sage and dust and the promise of winter. It was beautiful. Harsh, but beautiful. She sat down on a boulder and pulled out the last piece of hardtack from her bag. It was dry and tasteless, but it was all she had until she found work. As she chewed, she thought about Wade Brennan and his 13 rejected brides, 12 fancy ladies who'd imagined ranch life as some kind of romantic adventure, who'd probably expected a comfortable house with servants, perhaps, and a husband who'd treat them like delicate flowers, who'd arrived unprepared for the reality of dust and mud and endless work, and one rancher who'd learned to protect himself by rejecting them first. Clara understood that impulse. She'd learned young that expectations only led to disappointment. Her mother had expected her second husband to provide for them. He'd drunk away their money instead. Her stepfather had expected Clara to be grateful for a roof over her head. She'd been grateful to escape his fists. The bank had expected her to keep up with mortgage payments her father had taken. Out she'd tried until there was nothing left to try with. Expectations were dangerous things. So was giving up. Clara finished her hardtack and stood up, brushing crumbs from her worn dress. She'd find work somehow, even if it was just washing dishes or scrubbing floors. She'd survive because that's what she did. She survived. The sun was setting when she finally found Mrs. Chun's boarding house. The woman who answered her knock was tiny and ancient, with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. "You want work," Mrs. Chen said before Clara could speak. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am. Anything you need. I'm strong and quick and barefoot." Clara looked down at her feet, calloused and dirty from walking. "Yes, ma'am. I had shoes, but they wore out 2 months ago. Haven't been able to afford new ones yet." Mrs. Chun studied her for a long moment. Then she stepped aside. "Come in. You work tonight, help serve dinner. I watch how you work. If good, you stay. If lazy, you go." "I'm not lazy, ma'am. I promise, we see." The boarding house dining room was full that night, mostly cowboys and ranch hands, a few traveling salesmen, 2 families passing through. Clara worked without stopping, carrying heavy trays, refilling coffee, clearing plates, scrubbing pots in the kitchen. Her feet ached on the wooden floors, and her arms trembled from exhaustion. But she didn't slow down. Mrs. Chen watched everything with those sharp eyes. At one table, Clara overheard more conversation about Wade Brennan. "Heard he's giving up on the whole mail-order bride idea," one cowboy said. "Can't say I blame him. 13 tries is enough to break any man's spirit. Ranch is going to go under without help," another replied. "He can't manage all that land alone, and Jim's just one man. They need at least 3 more hands, plus someone to handle the house. Place is falling apart." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maybe he'll sell. Cut his losses. Not Wade. That ranch belonged to his parents. He'd rather die than let it go. Clara filed this information away as she worked, though she wasn't sure why it mattered to her. Wade Brennan's problems weren't her concern. She had her own survival to worry about. But as the night wore on and she scrubbed the last pot clean, Clara couldn't stop thinking about it. A ranch falling apart. A man too proud to give up, but too stubborn to compromise. A whole town that had turned his struggle into entertainment. And 13 women who'd been sent away because they weren't what he needed. What did he need? Not fancy dresses or polished manners. Not delicate sensibilities or romantic notions. Not someone who'd cry at the sight of an outhouse or faint at the smell of cattle. He needed someone who understood hard work. Someone who wouldn't break. Someone who'd already survived worse than dust and isolation could throw at them. Someone like ... No. Clara shook her head sharply, dismissing the ridiculous thought before it could fully form. Wade Brennan had rejected 12 women who were undoubtedly more suitable than she was. Beautiful women, educated women, women who at least owned shoes. He'd never looked twice at a barefoot farm girl with nothing to her name but a carpetbag of threadbare clothes. Besides, she wasn't looking for a husband. She was looking for passage to Oregon, and that was all. You work hard, Mrs. Chun said, appearing beside her. You stay. $1 a week plus room and meals. You start tomorrow, 5 in the morning. Relief flooded through Clara so intensely her knees went weak. Thank you, Mrs. Chun. Thank you so much. Room is small. In attic. You share with Lucy, she works here too. That's perfect. Anything is perfect. Thank you. Mrs. Chun's expression softened slightly. You good girl. Strong. You do okay here. That night, Clara lay on a narrow cot in the attic, listening to Lucy's soft snoring and staring at the ceiling. $1 a week. With free room and meals, she could save most of it. In 6 months, maybe 8, she'd have enough for train fare to Oregon. She could make it. She'd survive this just like she'd survived everything else. But as she drifted toward sleep, her last conscious thought wasn't about Oregon or survival or her brother waiting out west. It was about a rancher with impossible standards and dust on his boots. Walking away from the train platform alone. Heading back to a ranch that was falling apart because he couldn't find anyone willing to fall apart with him, and for reasons Clara couldn't quite explain. That image made her chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with exhaustion and everything to do with a loneliness she recognized all too well, because she knew exactly what it felt like to be rejected for not being enough. She knew exactly what it felt like to keep going anyway, alone. Building a life from nothing but grit and determination and the stubborn refusal to break. Maybe Wade Brennan wasn't looking for someone fancy, maybe he was looking for someone like her. But that was a foolish thought. And Clara had learned long ago that foolish thoughts only led to heartbreak. So she pushed it away and forced herself to sleep. Determined to focus on survival rather than impossible possibilities. Tomorrow she'd work. She'd save. She'd keep moving forward. And Wade Brennan would remain what he'd always been, a stranger, whose story intersected with hers for one afternoon on a train platform. Nothing more. That's what Clara told herself, but deep down, in a place she didn't want to examine too closely. She suspected that wasn't quite true. Something had shifted that afternoon. Some recognition had passed between them, even though they'd never spoken. A shared understanding of what it meant to be measured and found wanting. To have standards that the world found unreasonable. To keep looking for something real in a world full of pretense. Clara didn't know what would come of that recognition. But she knew somehow that this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Clara woke to Lucy shaking her shoulder in the pre-dawn darkness. Up, Mrs. Chun doesn't tolerate lateness. The attic was freezing, and Clara's muscles protested every movement as she dressed quickly in the dark. She'd only had 4 hours of sleep, but that was more than she'd gotten in weeks. She braided her hair back tightly, splashed icy water on her face from the basin, and followed Lucy down the narrow stairs. The kitchen was already warm from the stove, and Mrs. Chun was pulling fresh bread from the oven. The smell made Clara's stomach clench with hunger. You cook? Mrs. Chun asked without preamble. Yes, ma'am. Bread, stews, pies, preserves. I ran my family's kitchen for 3 years. Good. You help Lucy with breakfast. 30 guests this morning. Eggs, bacon, potatoes, biscuits. You make biscuits. For the next 3 hours, Clara worked in a blur of activity. Her biscuits came out light and golden. She'd made thousands of them over the years and could do it half asleep. The boarding house guests ate like men who'd been starved, going back for seconds and thirds. Clara kept the platters filled, the coffee hot, the tables cleared. She was refilling the coffee urn when she heard a familiar voice. "Jim! Didn't expect to see you in town midweek." Clara turned slightly and saw Wade, Brennan's foreman, settling at a corner table with 2 other ranch hands she didn't recognize. Jim looked exhausted, his face drawn. "Boss sent us in for supplies," Jim was saying. "Fence wire, nails, feed. We're running low on everything." "How's Wade holding up after yesterday's disaster?" "About how you'd expect, quiet, working himself half to death." Again, Jim accepted coffee from Lucy with a grateful nod. "I swear, that man's trying to kill himself with labor. Up before dawn, works until he can't see straight, falls into bed, and does it all again the next day. Maybe he'll finally give up on the whole wife idea. Can't afford to. Ranch needs help he can't pay for. A wife who'd work alongside him, that was the only solution that made financial sense." Jim rubbed his face tiredly. "But after 13 tries, I think even Wade's stubbornness has limits." Clara moved away before they could notice her eavesdropping, but her mind was churning. She'd lain awake half the night thinking about Wade Brennan. And now fate had dropped more information right in her lap. He needed help he couldn't afford to pay for. A wife who'd work. Not ornament, someone who wouldn't break. The idea that had seemed so foolish last night didn't seem quite so foolish in the cold morning light. It seemed practical. A business arrangement that would solve both their problems. But how could she possibly approach him? She was nobody, a homeless farm girl with no family, no references, no shoes. Why would he even listen to her? Clara was still wrestling with this question 3 days later, when opportunity literally rode into town. She was carrying water from the pump behind the boarding house. 2 heavy buckets that made her shoulders ache. When she heard the commotion from the main street. Shouting, the thunder of hooves, something that sounded like splintering wood. She set down the buckets and hurried around the building in time to see chaos unfolding. A wagon had overturned in the middle of the street, its contents sacks of grain spilled everywhere. 2 horses, still hitched to the wreckage, were panicking, rearing and thrashing in their traces. And right in the middle of it all was Wade Brennan, trying to calm them before they injured themselves or someone else. "Someone get a knife," Wade shouted. "Need to cut these traces before they break their legs." But the horses were wild with fear, and every time Wade got close they'd lunge away, dragging the overturned wagon and making everything worse. Blood was streaming from a cut on Wade's forehead where a hoof had clipped him. But he didn't seem to notice that the growing crowd kept a safe distance. Shouting advice but doing nothing useful, Clara didn't think. She just moved. She walked straight into the chaos, ignoring the gasps from onlookers, and began singing. It was an old song her father had taught her. Nonsense words in a language she didn't understand but had heard him use with spooked animals all her childhood. Her voice was low and steady, barely audible over the horses' screams, but she kept singing as she approached. The nearest horse's ears swiveled toward her. Still singing, Clara reached out slowly, her movements calm and deliberate. The horse shied, but she followed, maintaining that steady stream of sound. Her bare feet gave her better purchase on the dusty street than boots would have, letting her move with fluid balance. "Miss, get back!" Someone yelled, but Clara ignored them. She got her hand on the horse's sweat-soaked neck and kept singing, kept touching, kept breathing calmness into the terrified animal. The horse's eyes rolled white, but slowly, so slowly, its panic began to subside. "That's it," Clara murmured, switching from the song to words. "Easy now. You're all right. Nothing's going to hurt you. Easy." The second horse, seeing its teammate calm, began to settle too. Within minutes, both animals were standing still, sides heaving but no longer fighting. Wade appeared at her elbow, knife in hand. "Can you hold them?" "Yes." He cut the traces with quick, efficient movements, freeing the horses from the overturned wagon. Clara kept her hand on the first horse's neck, still murmuring reassurance, while Wade checked them both for injuries. "Minor scrapes, nothing serious," he said finally. Then he looked at Clara directly for the first time. "That was either very brave or very foolish." "Probably both," Clara admitted. "But I couldn't watch them hurt themselves." Wade studied her face, and Clara watched recognition dawn in his eyes. "You were on the platform." 3 days ago, yes, sir." "You good with all animals or just horses?" "Most animals. I grew up on a farm. Worked with horses, cattle, pigs, chickens. Even had a milk cow that would only let me near her." Clara kept her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "Animals don't care if you're fancy. They just care if you're honest." Something flickered across Wade's face, surprise, maybe, or appreciation. Before he could respond, Jim came running up. "Boss, you're bleeding." Jim grabbed Wade's arm. "Need to get you to Doc Morrison." "It's fine. Just a scratch." "It's not fine. You could have a concussion." Jim noticed Clara then, and his eyebrows rose. "Miss Hayes? From the boarding house?" "Yes, sir. She just walked into that mess like it was nothing and calmed both horses," Wade said. There was something in his voice Clara couldn't quite identify. "Sang to them in some language I don't know." "Cherokee," Clara said quietly. "My father learned it from a horse trader. He said the words don't matter, it's the tone that works. The certainty that everything will be all right." Wade's hand went to his forehead, came away bloody. He looked at it with mild surprise, as if only just realizing he was injured. "Doc, now." Jim's voice left no room for argument. He turned to Clara. "Thank you, miss. Those are valuable animals. You probably saved their lives." Clara nodded, suddenly aware of the crowd watching this exchange with intense interest. She could already hear the whispers starting. "That barefoot girl ... walked right up to those horses." "Wade." Brennan was watching her. She needed to leave before this became another spectacle for the town to gossip about. But before she could slip away, Wade spoke again. "Miss Hayes." He pulled off his hat despite the blood running into his eye. "I'm in your debt. If there's anything I can do to repay you." This was her moment. Clara knew it with sudden crystalline clarity. She might never get another chance to speak to Wade Brennan directly, to present her case without the interference of the town's expectations and judgment. But Jim was already pulling Wade toward the doctor's office. And the crowd was pressing closer, and the moment was slipping away. "I'll find you," Clara called after him. "When you're not bleeding." Wade actually smiled at that, a brief, surprised expression that transformed his weathered face. "Fair enough." Then Jim hustled him away, and the crowd began to disperse, and Clara was left standing in the street with her heart hammering and her mind racing. She'd spoken to him. He'd smiled at her. He'd said he was in her debt. It was more than she'd had 3 minutes ago. Mrs. Chun appeared at her elbow. "You come. Water buckets still need carrying. The town's excitement doesn't stop work." "Yes, ma'am." But as Clara returned to her tasks, she was already planning. She'd approach Wade properly, present her proposal clearly. She'd make him see that she could be exactly what he needed, not a fancy bride with unrealistic expectations, but a partner who understood hard work and wouldn't flinch from reality. She had nothing to lose and everything to gain. The question was, would he even listen? 2 days passed before Clara gathered enough courage to act on her plan. 2 days of working from dawn to dark, saving her dollar wages and rehearsing what she'd say. 2 days of anxiety and second-guessing and talking herself in and out of the idea 100 times. It was Jim who unknowingly provided the final push, He came into the boarding house for lunch on Saturday, looking even more exhausted than usual. Clara served him stew and fresh bread, and couldn't help overhearing his conversation with another ranch hand. "Wade's decided to stop looking," Jim was saying. "Says he's done with the whole mail-order bride business. Going to try to hire more help instead, even though we both know he can't afford it. Ranch going to survive? Hard to say. We're short-handed going into winter. Fences need mending. Cattle need moving to lower pasture. Roof on the barn needs patching before snow. It's too much for 3 men. Jim pushed food around his plate. "I've been with Wade for 6 years. Never seen him defeated." Clara made her decision. That afternoon, she asked Mrs. Chun for a few hours off. The old woman studied her with those sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. "You go see the rancher." It wasn't a question. Clara felt her face heat. "I was going to how did you know? I see how you listen when men talk about him. I see how you watch the street, looking for someone." Mrs. Chun folded her arms. "You think you want to be his wife?" "I think we could help each other," Clara corrected. "It's practical, not romantic." "Practical is good. Romance makes people stupid." Mrs. Chun nodded slowly. "You go, talk to him. But Clara, you be honest. Tell him the truth about who you are, what you can do. No pretending to be something you're not. Rancher needs truth, not fantasy." "I know. That's why I think I might actually have a chance." Mrs. Chun's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You brave girl. Brave and foolish like with the horses. Go, but you're back for dinner service, yes?" "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you." Clara washed her face and hands, braided her hair fresh, and put on her least patched dress. She had no shoes, no fine clothes, no way to make herself presentable by the town's standards. But Wade Brennan had rejected 12 presentable women. Maybe he needed someone unpresentable instead. The Brennan Ranch was 8 miles outside town. Clara walked, ignoring the stares from people who saw a barefoot girl heading out alone into the territory. The dirt road was rough on her feet, but she'd walked worse. The afternoon was cool and cloudy, threatening rain, which meant fewer people on the road to witness what might become her next public humiliation. The ranch appeared gradually as she crested a hill, first the windmill, then the barn, then the house itself. Clara stopped to study it from a distance. Everything Jim had said was true. The place was struggling. The barn roof sagged on one side. Fences showed gaps where wire had broken. The house needed painting, and the porch had missing boards. But beneath the neglect, Clara could see good bones. The structures were solid, well built originally. The land was decent grazing country with a creek running through it. The property had potential. It just needed someone willing to fight for it. Clara took a deep breath and kept walking. She was 50 yards from the house when Wade emerged from the barn, carrying a bucket of tools. He saw her and stopped, confusion crossing his face. "Miss Hayes?" "Mr. Brennan." Clara's mouth was dry, but she kept her voice steady. "I told you I'd find you when you weren't bleeding." He touched the bandage on his forehead, the cut from the horses, now properly dressed. "So you did. What brings you all the way out here?" "A proposition." Wade's eyebrows rose. He set down the bucket and waited. Clara had rehearsed the speech 100 times, but now that the moment was here, all her carefully planned words evaporated. She stood there in her patched dress and bare feet, facing a man who'd rejected 12 women, infinitely more suitable than she was, and suddenly couldn't remember why she'd thought this was a good idea. Then she saw his hands, cut and calloused and scarred from hard work. Hands that matched her own, and she remembered. "You need help," Clara said bluntly. "I need a home. I'm proposing we help each other." Wade's expression didn't change. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Yes, you do. You've been looking for a wife who can handle ranch work. Someone who won't break when things get hard. Someone practical, not decorative. Clara gestured at herself. Well, here I am. I'm not fancy. I'm not delicate. I don't own shoes. But I can work from dawn to dark and not complain. I can handle livestock, mend fences, cook, clean, preserve food, shoot if necessary. I grew up on a farm that failed, not because I didn't work hard enough, but because my father died and left debts I couldn't pay. I know exactly what ranch life is like. The good and the bad. Mostly the bad. Wade was staring at her like she'd sprouted a second head. Miss Haas, I know I'm not what you were looking for, Clara continued, words spilling out now in a rush. I'm not educated or refined. I have no family, no money, no references. But I watched you reject that woman on the platform, and I understood why. She wasn't suited for this life. None of them were. They wanted something that doesn't exist, some romantic fantasy, where ranch wives wear clean dresses and sip tea while men do all the real work. And you're different? Yes, because I don't have fantasies. I have reality. And reality is that I need somewhere to belong, and you need someone who can actually help you run this place. That's not romance, Mr. Brennan. That's business. Wade was quiet for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made Clara want to squirm. But she held his gaze, refusing to look away. You're serious, he said finally. Completely. You walked 8 miles to propose to a man you've never spoken to. I spoke to you 2 days ago. You said you were in my debt. Clara lifted her chin. I'm collecting that debt now. Not with money. With consideration. I'm asking you to consider me as a candidate for the position 12 other women couldn't fill. 13 women. 13 women who had choices, Clara corrected. Who had homes to return to, families to support them, other options. I don't have those things. This is it for me. Which means I won't change my mind when things get difficult. I can't afford to. Wade removed his hat, ran a hand through his hair. That same gesture she'd seen on the platform. The one that said he was thinking hard about something. Why me? Why this ranch? There are other men looking for wives. Because you're honest, Clara said simply. You didn't lie to those women. You didn't pretend your ranch was something it wasn't. You looked at them, saw they weren't suited for life, and you sent them away rather than trap them in a miserable existence. That takes integrity. And kindness, even if the town doesn't see it that way. Something flickered in Wade's eyes, surprise again, or maybe gratitude. Like someone had finally understood something he'd been trying to explain for a long time. My ranch is failing, he said quietly. I'm barely keeping it together. I can't offer you comfort or security or any of the things a husband should provide. I'm not asking for those things. I'm asking for work, purpose, and a partnership. Clara took a step closer. I know what failure looks like, Mr. Brennan. I've lived it. This ranch isn't there yet. But it will be if you don't get help soon. I can be that help. In exchange for what? A home. A name. A reason to stay. Clara swallowed hard. I won't pretend I love you. I don't know you. But I respect what you're trying to do here. And I think we could build something together. Not a romance, a ranch. An actual working partnership where we both contribute equally. Wade was shaking his head slowly, but not in rejection, more in disbelief. You're extraordinary. Do you know that? Clara blinked, thrown by the unexpected compliment. I'm practical. No, practical is planning ahead and making sensible choices. What you're doing is brave. Wade stepped closer, and Clara could see exhaustion etched in every line of his face. You're offering to tie your entire future to a failing ranch, and a man who's already proven he can't make a relationship work. That's not practical. That's either desperate or courageous, and I can't tell which. Maybe both, Clara admitted. But does it matter? The offer stands either way. Wade studied her for another long moment. Then, to Clara's shock, he smiled that same brief, transforming expression she'd glimpsed when he was bleeding in the street. My foreman Jim is going to think I've lost my mind. Clara's heart leaped. Does that mean? It means I'm considering it. Which I realize makes me every bit as desperate as you are. Wade replaced his hat. But before we go any further, you need to see what you'd actually be getting into. Come on, I'll give you the full tour. If you still want to make this arrangement after seeing the reality, then we'll talk terms. He started walking toward the barn, and Clara followed, her pulse racing with something that felt dangerously close to hope. Fair warning, Wade called over his shoulder. It's worse than it looks from a distance. Good, Clara called back. I don't trust things that look better than they are. Wade's laugh was rusty, like he hadn't used it in a while. But it was genuine, and it made Clara smile despite her nervousness. Maybe this insane plan would work. Maybe she'd finally found a place where being unpresentable, practical, and determined was exactly what someone needed. Maybe, for the first time in her life, being exactly who she was would be enough. The barn door creaked as Wade pulled it open, revealing the dim interior. All right, Miss Hayes, let me show you what you're volunteering for. And if you run screaming back to town, I'll understand completely. Clara stepped inside, her eyes adjusting to the darkness. She could smell hay and leather and the sharp tang of manure that needed mucking. The roof leaked in one corner. She could see water damage on the support beam. Tools hung haphazardly on walls, and the whole structure had the air of something slowly surrendering to gravity and time. It was exactly what she'd expected. I've seen worse, Clara said calmly. Wade looked at her with something that might have been respect. You keep saying that, because it keeps being true. Then I suppose we better continue the tour. There's a lot more worse to show you. As they walked through the struggling ranch together, Clara asking practical questions and Wade giving honest answers, neither of them noticed. Jim watching from the far pasture, his expression somewhere between shock and reluctant approval, and neither of them knew that this unlikely conversation would become the foundation of something neither had expected to find. Not just a partnership, but a legend that would outlast them both. The story of a barefoot farm girl and a lonely rancher who chose honesty over romance and built something real from the ruins of everyone else's expectations. But that would come later. For now, there was just a tour, a conversation, and two people discovering that sometimes the most unlikely matches are the ones that actually work. The tour took 2 hours, and by the end of it, Clara understood exactly why 13 women had fled. The ranch wasn't just struggling, it was gasping its last breaths. The house had a leaking roof in the bedroom and kitchen. The stove worked, but barely, requiring constant adjustment to maintain temperature. The well pump needed replacing. Wade had been hauling water from the creek for 3 weeks. The chicken coop had been raided by a fox so many times that only 5 hens remained. The vegetable garden was overrun with weeds, and frost had already killed what little had been growing there. Wade showed her everything without apology or embellishment. When the porch board cracked under Clara's foot, nearly sending her through to the ground below, he simply said, "That's been on my list for 6 months. Haven't had time." Clara peered into the gap. "You're lucky it didn't break completely. Someone could get seriously hurt." "I know. Add it to the list of things that could kill me that I'm ignoring because I have to." Wade's voice was matter-of-fact, but Clara heard the exhaustion underneath. "The barn roof is worse. Lost 3 shingles in last month's storm. When winter really hits, we'll be in trouble. Show me the cattle situation." They walked to the pasture where about 40 head grazed, looking thin despite the decent grassland. Wade leaned on the fence, and Clara watched him calculate losses in his head. "Should have twice this many," he said finally. "Sold half last year to pay debts my father left. Been trying to build the herd back up, but between predators, disease, and bad luck, I'm barely maintaining numbers. He pointed to a section of fence held together with wire and hope. That needs replacing. So does the entire eastern boundary. But fence wire costs money I don't have. What about the cattle themselves? Any problems with the current stock? Wade glanced at her with surprise. You know cattle? Enough. My father ran beef cattle along with dairy. I know calving, I know basic veterinary care, and I know when an animal is worth keeping versus when it's dead weight. Clara studied the herd critically. That red one there third from the left. She's favoring her back leg. Wade squinted. You're right. Didn't notice that. Could be hoof rot. Probably is, given the mud near the creek. You'll want to check it before it spreads. Clara turned to face him directly. Mr. Brennan, I'm not trying to tell you your business. But you asked me to see the reality, and the reality is you need more than a wife. You need a full working partner and at least 2 more ranch hands. Since you can't afford the hands, you need someone who can do the work of 3 people. And you think you're that person? I know I am. The question is whether you're willing to find out. Wade was quiet for a long moment, studying the struggling ranch that was slowly killing him. Then he said something Clara didn't expect. My parents built this place from nothing. Took them 20 years to make it profitable. My father died 5 years ago. Left me with debts I didn't know about. He borrowed against the ranch to expand, then got sick before the expansion could pay off. My mother followed him 6 months later. Broken heart, the doctor said, but I think it was just giving up. His voice was rough with old grief. I've been fighting to keep this place alive ever since. Partly because it's my inheritance. Mostly because letting it fail feels like betraying them. Clara understood that burden. My father took a loan to buy new equipment. Modern plow, better seed. He thought it would save the farm. Instead, he worked himself to death trying to make enough to pay it back, and when he died, the bank came for everything. She swallowed hard. I understand about debts and dead parents and fighting for something that might already be lost. Wade looked at her then, really looked at her, and Clara saw recognition in his eyes. Not attraction, something deeper. The recognition of a fellow survivor. All right, he said. Here's my offer. 1-month trial. You live here, work alongside me and Jim, do whatever needs doing. End of the month, we both decide if this arrangement works. If it does, we get married legal and proper. If it doesn't, I pay you wages for the month's work and you go back to town. No hard feelings either way. That's fair. But I have conditions. Wade's eyebrows rose. You're negotiating? Of course. This is a business arrangement. Clara counted on her fingers. First, I get my own room during the trial period. Door that locks. Second, if we do get married, it's a real partnership. I have equal say in ranch decisions. Third, you teach me everything you know about cattle ranching. I'm good, but I can always be better. And if I agree to all that, then you have yourself a deal, Mr. Brennan. Clara held out her hand. Wade stared at her outstretched hand for a moment, then grasped it firmly. His palm was rough with calluses, and the handshake was brief and businesslike. Call me Wade. If we're going to be partners, we should use first names. Wade, then. And I'm Clara. She released his hand. When do I start? Now, if you're willing. Daylight's wasting, and those chickens need feeding. Clara smiled. Show me where you keep the feed. That first day set the pattern for everything that followed. Wade showed Clara the basic operations where supplies were kept, how the stove's temperamental personality worked, which cattle were prone to wandering where the property boundaries lay. She absorbed information like parched earth absorbing rain, asking questions when something wasn't clear and making mental notes about everything. By the time Jim returned from checking the northern fence line at sunset, He found Clara mucking out stalls while Wade repaired a broken gate. "Boss?" Jim's voice was careful. "You want to tell me what's happening here?" Wade looked up from his work. "Jim, this is Clara Hayes. She's on a month-long trial to see if she's suited for ranch work." "Suited for?" Jim's eyes went wide. "You're considering another bride? After you swore you were done?" "Clara's different. She proposed to me." "She what?" Clara straightened from her work, pitchfork in hand. "I offered him a business partnership, Mr. Jim. I need a home. He needs help. It's practical." Jim looked between them like they'd both lost their minds. "Practical, right. And the town knowing about this? Mrs. Fletcher and her gossip circle? That's going to be practical too." "Don't care what the town thinks," Wade said flatly. "I've given them enough entertainment already. This is my business." "And hers," Clara added. "Nobody else's." Jim studied Clara for a long moment, her bare feet planted in manure-soaked straw, her worn dress already dirty from work, her hands gripping the pitchfork with easy competence. Whatever he saw made him nod slowly. "All right then. Welcome to the Brennan Ranch, Miss Clara. Fair warning, we work hard here." "Good," Clara said. "I'd hate to be bored." That earned her a surprised laugh from Jim, and something that might have been approval from Wade. The first week was a test of everything Clara had claimed she could do. Wade and Jim didn't ease her into the work. They threw her into the deep end and watched to see if she'd drown. She didn't. The first morning, Wade woke her at 4:30 before Dawn had even considered arriving. Cattle don't care if you're tired. They need feeding. Clara was up and dressed in 5 minutes, following Wade through darkness to the barn. The work was exactly as hard as she'd expected, hauling hay bales that weighed almost as much as she did. Breaking ice on water troughs, checking cattle for injury or illness in dim lantern light. Her muscles screamed. Her back ached. Her bare feet went numb in the cold. She didn't complain once. By the time the sun rose, they'd completed the morning feeding. Wade made breakfast eggs from the surviving hens, bacon, coffee strong enough to strip paint, and they ate quickly before heading out again. "Eastern fence today," Wade said. "Needs major repairs." "You ever replace fence posts?" "No, but I can learn." "You'll need boots." "Can't do that kind of work barefoot." Wade pulled a pair of old work boots from a closet. "These were my mother's. Might fit." The boots were too big, but Clara stuffed rags in the toes and laced them tight. They were the first shoes she'd worn in months, and the leather felt strange and confining. But Wade was right. She needed them for the work ahead. Replacing fence posts was brutal labor. Digging holes in half-frozen ground, lifting heavy posts, stringing wire tight enough to keep cattle in and predators out. Clara's hands blistered within an hour. By afternoon, the blisters had burst and bled, making every movement agony. Wade noticed but said nothing until they stopped for water. "Your hands are a mess. They'll toughen up." Clara drank deeply, ignoring the sting of sweat in her wounds. "You could take a break. Come back to this tomorrow. Could you take a break?" Wade's mouth twitched. "No. Then neither can I. We're partners, remember? Equal work." They finished the eastern fence as the sun set, having replaced 12 posts and restrung a 1/4 mile of wire. Clara's entire body was one massive ache, but when she looked at the straight, sturdy fence line, she felt something close to pride. "Good work," Wade said simply. Then, as they walked back to the house, "You surprised me today." "How?" "Most people would have quit after the first hour. Even Jim took breaks when we did this section last year." Wade glanced at her sideways. "You just kept going. Quitting doesn't fix fences." "No, but most people quit anyway when things get hard enough." Clara thought about her father, working himself to death rather than quit. About her mother, giving up after he was gone. About the 13 women who'd taken one look at this life and walked away. "I'm not most people," she said quietly. I'm beginning to see that. The second week brought new challenges. The red cow Clara had spotted developed full-blown hoof rot that required treatment, holding the thrashing animal still while Wade cleaned and medicated the infected hoof. Clara got kicked twice, hard enough to leave bruises that would last weeks. But she maintained her grip until the job was done. "You've got cow shit in your hair," Wade observed afterward. Clara reached up, felt the evidence, and shrugged. "Won't be the last time." Wade actually smiled at that. Probably not. The third week, a November storm rolled in early winter, announcing its intentions. The temperature dropped 20 degrees overnight, and when Clara woke, the world was white with snow. "This is it," Wade said grimly over breakfast. "This is the test. Can you handle winter on a ranch?" Only one way to find out. The storm lasted 3 days. 3 days of fighting through snow to feed animals, breaking ice on water sources every few hours, checking constantly for cattle that had wandered or gotten stuck. 3 days of wet, freezing cold that penetrated every layer of clothing and seemed to settle in Clara's bones. On the second night, the barn roof finally gave up its struggle. A section collapsed under the weight of wet snow, narrowly missing 2 horses. Wade and Clara worked through the night in blizzard conditions to rig a temporary cover, both of them soaked and shaking with cold by the time they finished. Back in the house, Wade built up the fire while Clara changed into dry clothes with fingers too numb to work properly at the buttons. "Hot coffee," Wade said, pressing a cup into her hands when she emerged. "Drink it all." Clara obeyed, feeling warmth gradually return to her body. Wade had changed too, and was making more coffee, his movements automatic with exhaustion. "That was close," Clara said. "If that roof had fallen on the horses, it didn't. Because you heard the creaking before I did and got them moved." Wade sat down heavily at the table. "You saved their lives tonight, Clara. We saved them. I couldn't have rigged that cover alone." "No, but most people wouldn't have tried. Would have waited until morning, and by then the horses would be dead." Wade looked at her across the table, and his expression was different than she'd ever seen it: open, honest, maybe even grateful. "You're the real thing. You know that? Not playing at ranch life. Actually living it." Clara felt something warm bloom in her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. "So are you. I don't have a choice. This is my life. You chose to keep fighting for it. You could have sold out, moved to town, found easier work." Clara met his eyes. "Instead you're here, bleeding yourself dry for a place most people would abandon. That's a choice, Wade. Every single day you choose this." He was quiet for a long moment. "Then, why'd you really come here, Clara?" "The truth. Not the practical reasons, the real reason." Clara considered lying, giving him the answer that would sound most acceptable. But they'd spent 3 weeks working side by side, and she'd learned that Wade valued honesty above everything else. "Because I was tired of not belonging anywhere," she said finally. "After my father died, after we lost the farm, I spent 2 years drifting. Working odd jobs, sleeping in barns, never staying anywhere long enough to matter. And I realized that's not living. That's just existing." She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "When I saw you on that platform, rejecting women who wanted something fake, I thought maybe you'd accept something real. Someone real. Someone who wanted to build, not just exist." Wade nodded slowly, like she'd confirmed something he'd suspected. "I stopped believing in romance after my parents died. Watched my mother literally die of grief, and I thought love was the most dangerous thing in the world. Better to be alone than risk that kind of pain." He stared into his coffee. "But partnership, building something together, 2 people working toward the same goal that I could believe in. That seemed safe, is it?" Clara asked. "Safe? I don't know yet. Ask me at the end of the month." But Clara already knew her answer. This wasn't safe. Nothing about this was safe. She was falling into something that looked like partnership but felt dangerously close to something else, something that could hurt far worse than blistered hands or kicked ribs or freezing storms. She was starting to care about this man and his impossible dream of saving a dying ranch. And caring meant vulnerability, meant risk, meant the possibility of loss. But looking at Wade across the table, both of them exhausted and half-frozen and covered in the evidence of hard work, Clara couldn't bring herself to regret it. Safe was overrated anyway. The fourth week brought the biggest test, yet not physical, but social. The town had gotten wind of Clara's presence at the ranch, and Mrs. Fletcher, the self-appointed guardian of Timber Ridge's morality, decided to pay a visit. She arrived in a buggy with 2 other church ladies, all of them dressed in their finest, clearly expecting to find scandal and moral corruption. Instead, they found Clara in the barn, helping Wade deliver a calf from a cow who'd gone into labor early. Clara was elbow-deep in birthing fluids, her face streaked with sweat and blood, talking the panicked cow through contractions while Wade prepared to pull the breech calf. "Oh my Lord!" Mrs. Fletcher's voice echoed through the barn. "What is happening here?" "Birth," Clara said without looking up. "Wade, it's coming now. Pull when I tell you." They worked together with practiced coordination, Clara soothing the cow while Wade extracted the calf alive, thank God, breathing and squirming in his arms. The mother immediately began licking her baby clean, making low sounds of contentment. Only then did Clara look at their visitors. 3 women stood frozen in shock, clearly not having expected to witness actual ranching. "Mrs. Fletcher," Clara said calmly, wiping blood on her already ruined apron. "Can we help you with something?" "Help us, young lady. You're living alone with a man. Unchaperoned." "The scandal. We're working," Wade interrupted, his voice flat. "Clara's on a trial period as a potential business partner. Everything is proper and above board." "Proper?" "She's covered in Mrs. Fletcher seemed unable to find words for the combination of fluids coating Clara. "Birth," Clara supplied helpfully. "It's a messy business. But the calf's healthy, which is what matters." One of the other ladies leaned closer to Mrs. Fletcher and whispered something that sounded like, "She's got cow blood in her hair." "I'm aware," Clara said. "It'll wash out." Mrs. Fletcher drew herself up to full height. "Mr. Brennan, surely you can see this situation is completely inappropriate. This girl is clearly—" "This woman," Wade corrected, his voice going cold, "is the hardest worker I've ever met. She's been here 4 weeks, and in that time we've repaired a 1/4 mile of fence, treated 3 sick cattle, survived a major storm, and just successfully delivered a breech calf that would have died without her quick thinking. So yes, Mrs. Fletcher, I can see exactly what this situation is." "Can you?" The barn went absolutely silent. Even the newborn calf seemed to hold its breath. Mrs. Fletcher's face went through several shades of red. "The propriety, what will people think?" "I don't care," Wade said flatly. "I stopped caring what people thought after I became their entertainment by rejecting 13 brides. If the town wants to gossip about me and Clara working together to save a dying ranch, let them. At least it's truth they're gossiping about instead of speculation." Clara felt something fierce and warm expand in her chest. Wade was defending her. Not because he had to, but because he genuinely believed she deserved defending. "Clara," Wade said, not taking his eyes off Mrs. Fletcher, "are you being mistreated here? Forced to do anything against your will? Feel unsafe in any way?" "No," Clara said clearly. "I'm exactly where I choose to be, doing exactly what I want to do." "You heard her. Now if you'll excuse us, we have a newborn to monitor and work to finish. Feel free to spread that around town." Wade Brennan and Clara Hayes delivered a healthy calf today. "Scandal all you want about that." Mrs. Fletcher and her companions left in a flurry of offended dignity. And Clara could already imagine the gossip spreading through Timber Ridge like wildfire. Once they were gone, Clara looked at Wade. "You know, that just made everything worse." "I know. Don't care." Wade was checking the calf, making sure it was nursing properly. They were going to talk regardless. At least this way, we controlled the narrative. "We're going to be the scandal of the county. Probably." Wade straightened, met her eyes across the stall. "Does that bother you?" Clara thought about it. A month ago, she would have been terrified of being the center of gossip, of being judged and found wanting yet again. But standing here in a barn, covered in the honest evidence of hard work, having just helped bring new life into the world, she found she didn't care what Mrs. Fletcher or anyone else thought. "No," she said honestly. "It doesn't." "Good." Wade's expression softened. "Because you're going to need that thick skin. If you stay, if we make this partnership permanent, the talk won't stop. People will always have opinions about us. Then they can keep their opinions to themselves, and we'll keep living our lives." Clara knelt beside the calf, stroking its damp fur. "This little one doesn't care about scandal. It just cares about being alive." "We should name it," Wade said. Suddenly Clara looked up in surprise. "Name it?" "My mother used to name all the calves. Said it was good luck." Wade's voice was soft with memory. "I stopped after she died. Seemed pointless. But maybe it's time to start again. What should we call it?" Wade considered. "Hope, because it was born early, survived a difficult birth, and represents the start of rebuilding our herd. Hope seems appropriate." Clara felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "Hope, I like that." They stayed in the barn for another hour, making sure Hope was nursing properly and the mother was recovering well. The work was gentle now, peaceful after the urgency of birth. Clara found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't since arriving at the ranch, not just physically, but emotionally. Like she'd been holding her breath for 4 weeks and could finally exhale. That evening, over a dinner of stew Clara had prepared earlier, Wade spoke. 4 weeks is up tomorrow." Clara's heart stuttered. "I know. I have my decision. But I need to hear yours first." Wade set down his fork, gave her his full attention. "Stay or go, Clara. This is your choice. No pressure, no judgment either way." Clara looked around the kitchen, still shabby, but cleaner than it had been a month ago. She thought about the repaired fences, the treated cattle, the barn roof they'd patched together, the newborn calf sleeping peacefully in the barn. She thought about 4 weeks of the hardest work she'd ever done, and how she'd felt more alive during that time than in all her years before. She thought about Wade, this quiet, determined man who defended her to the town gossips, who worked until he could barely stand, who just named a calf Hope because maybe, finally, he was starting to believe in possibilities again, and she knew her answer. "I stay," Clara said. "If you'll have me." Wade let out a breath she hadn't realized he'd been holding. "I was hoping you'd say that." "So we agreed? This partnership permanent?" "It is." Wade stood, moved to a shelf, and pulled down a small box. "I should do this properly, I suppose." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band. "This was my mother's wedding ring. My father gave it to her when they got married in a ceremony that lasted 5 minutes because they had crops to plant. It's not fancy, but it's real. And it's been blessed by 50 years of actual partnership." He held it out to Clara. "If you're willing to wear it." Clara took the ring with trembling fingers. It was warm from being stored near the stove, plain and unadorned, exactly what a working ranch woman would need. Nothing to catch on fences or tools. Nothing to get in the way of real work. "It's perfect," she whispered. "We'll go to town tomorrow, get married at the courthouse. Simple ceremony, just the legal part. No fuss." Wade's voice was matter-of-fact, but his eyes were warm. "That work for you?" "That works perfectly." Clara slipped the ring on her finger. It fit like it had been made for her. They stood there for a moment. Two people who'd started as strangers and become something else through 4 weeks of shared struggle. Not lovers, not yet, but partners, builders, people who'd chosen each other not out of desperation or romance, but out of clear-eyed assessment of what they each needed and could offer. "Thank you," Clara said quietly, "for taking the chance on me. Thank you for taking the chance on a dying ranch and a stubborn fool." Wade smiled, that rare, genuine expression that transformed his whole face. "Now, partner, we should get some sleep. Got a wedding to attend tomorrow, and then a barn roof that still needs proper fixing." "Romance really is dead," Clara said, but she was smiling. "Romance is impractical. Partnership is what keeps people alive out here." Wade headed toward his room, then paused. "But for what it's worth, Clara, I'm glad it's you. I didn't know what I was looking for until you walked up that path with your bare feet and your proposition. But it was you." He closed his door before she could respond, leaving Clara standing alone in the kitchen. Her mother-in-law's ring warm on her finger and something equally warm expanding in her chest. Tomorrow, she'd become Mrs. Wade Brennan. Tomorrow she'd officially tie her future to this struggling ranch and this impossible man. Tomorrow, the proving ground would become home, and Clara discovered she wasn't afraid. She was ready. The courthouse. Wedding took exactly 7 minutes. Judge Morrison, who'd presided over Timber Ridge's legal matters for 30 years, kept glancing at Clara's work-roughened hands and Wade's bandaged knuckles like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Jim stood as witness, looking vaguely uncomfortable in a clean shirt he'd clearly borrowed for the occasion. "Do you, Wade Brennan, take this woman?" "I do. I haven't finished the question." "Sorry, continue." Judge Morrison sighed. "To be your lawfully wedded wife, in sickness and health. For richer or poorer, yes to all of it. Mr. Brennan, please allow me to complete the ceremony." "Apologies, Your Honor, but we have a mare due to fold this afternoon, and I'd like to be there when it happens." The judge looked at Clara. "Is he always like this?" "Practical to a fault," Clara confirmed. "But he means well. Clara Hayes, or shortly to be Clara Brennan, do you take this impatient man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife. Mr. Brennan, you may kiss your bride. Preferably before you run off to deliver livestock." Wade looked at Clara, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly. He leaned in and pressed a brief, chaste kiss to her lips, more of a formal gesture than anything romantic. But his hand squeezed hers gently before releasing it, and that somehow meant more than any passionate embrace would have. "Congratulations," Jim said, shaking both their hands. "You're either the bravest people I know or the craziest." "Possibly both." "Definitely both," Wade agreed. "Clara, we should check on Daisy, I know." Clara gathered her skirts, the cleanest dress she owned, still patched in 3 places. "Thank you, Judge Morrison. Good luck to you both. Something tells me you'll need it." The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Clara sat beside Wade on the wagon bench, watching the familiar landscape roll past. She was married now, Mrs. Wade Brennan. A ranch wife, legally and officially. It didn't feel real yet. "You're quiet," Wade observed. "Just thinking. Second thoughts?" "No, just adjusting." Clara glanced at him. "This time yesterday, I was Clara Hayes, temporary ranch hand. Now I'm Clara Brennan, permanent partner. It's a lot of change for 7 minutes. We can go slow. Take time to figure this out." Wade kept his eyes on the road. "I meant what I said about partnership. This doesn't have to be complicated." Clara understood what he wasn't saying. Their marriage was practical, not romantic. They'd sleep in separate rooms, work as partners, build the ranch together. Anything beyond that would develop naturally, or not at all. It should have been a relief. Instead, Clara felt a strange disappointment she couldn't quite name. The mare, Daisy, went into labor 2 hours after they returned. Clara and Wade worked together in the barn, guiding the birth with practiced hands. This foal came easier than Hope had a strong filly who struggled to her feet within minutes, already looking for milk. Another good sign, Wade said, watching mother and daughter bond. 2 healthy births in 1 week. Maybe our luck is finally turning. Luck has nothing to do with it. You've been working yourself to death, keeping these animals healthy. Clara wiped sweat from her forehead. They're thriving because you refuse to let them do anything else. We refuse to let them. Wade stood, offering Clara his hand to help her up. You're part of this now, Clara. Every success, every failure, we share it all. His hand was warm and solid in hers. Clara felt calluses that matched her own, strength earned through labor rather than given. When she was on her feet, he didn't immediately release her hand. I'm glad you stayed, he said quietly. Haven't said that directly, but I am. So am I. They stood there for a moment longer than necessary before Wade cleared his throat and stepped back. Dinner. We should eat something that isn't jerky for once. Clara cooked that night a proper meal of roasted chicken, potatoes, and the last of the vegetables from the neglected garden. Wade set the table without being asked, and they ate together in comfortable silence. This was her life now. This kitchen, this table, this quiet man across from her who smelled like horse and hard work. It wasn't what she'd imagined marriage would be. Back when she was young enough to have romantic notions, it was better. Real instead of imagined. Built on honesty instead of illusions. After dinner, Wade pulled out a worn ledger. Should show you the finances. You're entitled to know exactly what you've married into. The numbers were brutal. Debts from Wade's father's expansion, ongoing costs for feed and supplies, minimal income from the reduced herd. The ranch was surviving, barely, but any major disaster would sink it completely. We need to increase the herd, Clara said, studying the figures. But we can't afford to buy cattle. No, we have to breed what we have and hope for good calves. Wade ran a hand through his hair. Takes time we might not have. What about diversifying? Chickens, pigs, maybe a dairy cow or 2. More animals means more work. Good thing you married a workhorse then. Clara tapped the ledger. We could sell eggs and butter in town. It's not much, but it's steady income. And pigs practically raise themselves if you have scraps to feed them. Wade considered this. You know pigs? Raised them for 3 years. They're smarter than people give them credit for, and they'll eat anything. Turn scraps into profit. Clara met his eyes. It's not glamorous, but glamorous doesn't pay bills. No, it doesn't. Wade nodded slowly. All right. We'll start small. A few pigs, increase the chicken flock if we can protect them from foxes better. You really think you can manage that on top of everything else? Won't know until I try. That became Clara's motto over the following weeks. Won't know until I try. She tried repairing the chicken coop, using scrap wood and wire to make it more secure. The hens, sensing improved safety, started laying more consistently. She tried her hand at butchering one of the older roosters, preserving the meat and using the feathers for pillow stuffing. Nothing wasted. She tried making soap from lard and lye. Strong enough to clean work clothes and gentle enough for skin. Mrs. Chun bought 6 bars for the boarding house. She tried everything. Failed at some things, succeeded at others, and learned from all of it. Wade watched her with something that looked like amazed respect. You ever stop? He asked one evening, finding her in the kitchen after a full day of ranch work, making preserves from wild berries she'd harvested. Do you? That's different. I've been doing this for years. So have I, just in different places. Clara sealed another jar. Besides, winter's coming. We need to put up as much food as possible. Wade moved to help without being asked, and they worked side by side until the kitchen was filled with sealed jars of preserves. The sight of them rows of deep purple against the shelf gave Clara a fierce satisfaction. "We did that," she said softly. "Made something from nothing." "You did that." "I just helped." Wade was looking at her with an expression Clara couldn't quite read. "You're extraordinary, you know that? You keep saying that, because it keeps being true." He hesitated, then added, "My mother would have liked you." The words hit Clara harder than expected. She knew how much Wade's parents meant to him, how their memory drove his determination to save the ranch. Being told his mother would have approved, it meant something. "I wish I could have known her. She'd have put you to work immediately. Then fed you until you couldn't move, then put you to work again." Wade smiled at the memory. "Practical woman. Like you." She understood what it took to build something lasting. "Is that what we're doing? Building something lasting?" "I hope so." Wade's voice was quiet. "Feels like it, doesn't it? Like we're laying foundation stones that might actually hold." Clara nodded, unable to trust her voice. Because he was right, this did feel like building something. Not just a working ranch, but something larger and more permanent. Something that might outlast them both if they could just hold on long enough. That night, lying in her own room, Wade had insisted she keep it. Maintaining proper boundaries, Clara stared at the ceiling and admitted something to herself. She'd been avoiding. She was falling in love with her husband, not the wild, impractical love that destroyed people, but something quieter and more dangerous. A love built on respect and shared labor and the way he defended her to town gossips. The way he listened when she spoke. The way he never once made her feel small or insufficient. It terrified her, because loving Wade meant risk, meant vulnerability, meant the possibility of loss if this partnership failed, if the ranch failed, if any of 1,000 things went wrong. But lying there with the ring warm on her finger, and the sound of Wade's footsteps settling in the next room, Clara couldn't make herself regret it. Some risks were worth taking. The first real test of their partnership came 3 weeks after the wedding. When winter arrived with savage intensity, the storm rolled in at midnight. Clara woke to wind screaming around the house and snow hammering the windows. She was dressed and out of her room in seconds, nearly colliding with Wade in the hallway. "Cattle," he said shortly. "I'll get the horses ready." They worked with desperate efficiency, bundling into every layer they owned before heading into the blizzard. The wind was strong enough to knock Clara sideways, snow thick enough that she could barely see Wade 2 feet ahead of her. The cattle had huddled together in the lee of a rocky outcrop, but several calves were missing, including Hope. "We have to find them," Clara shouted over the wind. "They won't survive this. Split up. Cover more ground. No. We stay together or we both die out here." Clara grabbed Wade's arm. "I'm not losing you to find a calf." For a moment, she thought he'd argue. Then he nodded and they moved together, searching the white chaos for any sign of the missing calves. Clara found Hope first, a dark shape nearly buried in a snowdrift. The calf was alive but hypothermic, shaking violently. Without thinking, Clara stripped off her outer coat and wrapped it around the small body. "Are you insane?" Wade yelled. "You'll freeze." "So will she. Help me get her to the barn." They half-carried, half-dragged Hope back to the barn, Wade shielding Clara from the worst of the wind with his body. By the time they made it inside, Clara was shaking as badly as the calf. Wade immediately wrapped his own coat around her. "You're ice cold. We need to get you warm. Hope first. She's worse off." Clara's teeth were chattering so hard she could barely speak. "Damn it. Clara, Hope first." They rubbed the calf down, wrapped her in every spare blanket they could find, and gradually brought her temperature back up. Only then did Wade turn his attention to Clara, who was shivering violently despite being inside. "You're going to the house, now." His voice left no room for argument. "The other calves, Jim can search for them when the storm breaks. You've done enough." Wade practically carried her to the house, sat her by the stove, and began peeling off her wet clothes with impersonal efficiency. "I can do it myself," Clara protested weakly. "You're shaking too hard to work buttons. Sit still." He wrapped her in dry blankets, made hot coffee, and basically forced her to drink it. Gradually, warmth returned to Clara's body, though her hands still trembled. "That was stupid," Wade said finally. His voice was rough with something that might have been anger or fear. "Risking yourself like that, Hope would have died. Hope is a cow. You're—" He cut himself off, looking away. "I'm what?" "You're my wife. My partner. And I can't—" Wade's hands clenched into fists. "I can't lose you, Clara. Do you understand? This ranch, these cattle, none of it matters if something happens to you." Clara stared at him, her heart hammering. This wasn't the voice of a man discussing a business partner. This was something else entirely. "Wade, I know what we agreed. Practical partnership, nothing more. But somewhere between fence posts and berths and preserves, it stopped being just practical." He finally met her eyes. "At least for me. And if that's a problem, if I'm breaking our agreement, then I'm sorry. But I needed you to know before you did something foolish like freezing to death for a calf again." Clara set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. "It stopped being just practical for me too. Weeks ago, actually. I just didn't know how to tell you." Wade went very still. "You mean that? I married you for practical reasons. But I stayed married to you because somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you. The real you stubborn, honorable, impossible man that you are." Clara pulled the blankets tighter. "I'm sorry if that complicates things." "Complicates," Wade laughed, a sound caught between relief and disbelief. "Clara, it's the least complicated thing in my life right now." He moved closer, cupping her face in his rough hands. "Can I kiss you? Properly this time. I thought you'd never ask." This kiss was nothing like the chaste peck at the courthouse. It was heat and hunger and the release of weeks of building tension. Wade kissed her like she was water and he was dying of thirst. And Clara responded with equal desperation, her cold hands finding warmth in his hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said simply. "Probably since you walked up to my ranch barefoot and offered me a business proposition. But definitely since you wrapped a hypothermic calf in your own coat and nearly died, proving you meant every word about being a partner. I love you too. Even though you're terrible at romance and our first real kiss happened while I'm wrapped in blankets like an invalid, romance is impractical. Shut up and kiss me." Again, he did. The storm lasted 2 more days. But they found all the missing calves alive. Hope made a full recovery, and Wade swore the calf followed Clara around like a devoted dog afterward. "She knows you saved her life," he said, watching Hope trail after Clara during evening feeding. "She knows I'm a soft touch who'll sneak her extra grain," Clara corrected. "Don't romanticize it." "Too late. I romanticize everything about you now." Wade pulled Clara close, kissing the top of her head. "It's a sickness. Incurable? Absolutely." Their partnership shifted after that night. They still worked side by side, still operated the ranch with practical efficiency. But now there were stolen kisses in the barn, Wade's hand finding Clara's during dinner, the sound of laughter echoing through rooms that had been silent for too long. And at night, Clara no longer slept in her own room. The ranch began to recover slowly, painfully, but unmistakably. The increased chicken flock provided steady egg income. The pigs Clara had acquired turned scraps into profit exactly as she'd predicted. The cattle herd grew with each successful birth, and Wade's careful management kept losses minimal. Mrs. Fletcher and her gossips never did approve of the Brennans. The town considered their marriage scandalous, improper, backwards. The Brennans didn't care. Spring came, bringing new life to the ranch. The garden Clara had replanted flourished. The barn roof got properly repaired. The house got a fresh coat of paint. And on a warm April morning, Clara stood on the newly repaired porch, watching Wade work with the horses in the corral, and felt something close to complete contentment. Admiring the view? Jim called, riding up with supplies from town. Always, Clara helped him unload. How's the gossip this week? Same as ever. Mrs. Fletcher still scandalized that you work in the barn. Someone started a betting pool on how long your marriage would last. Jim grinned. I've got money on forever, so don't make a liar out of me. Forever sounds about right. Clara glanced at her husband, who was patiently teaching a young horse to accept a saddle. We're building something lasting here, Jim. Can feel it in my bones. I know. I've been watching it happen. Jim's expression turned serious. You saved him, you know. Wade was killing himself slowly, trying to keep this place alive alone. You gave him a reason to hope again. He saved me too. Gave me a place to belong when I had nothing. Clara touched the ring on her finger. Wade's mother's ring, now hers. We saved each other. That night, over dinner made from their own chickens, vegetables from their own garden, served at their own table in their own house, Wade made an announcement. We're debt-free. Clara's fork clattered to her plate. What? Made the last payment this morning. The ranch is ours, Clara. Completely ours. No bank, no loans, nothing hanging over us. Wade's smile was brilliant, transforming his whole face. We did it. Clara launched herself across the table, kissing him soundly while dinner went cold. We did it. We actually did it. Couldn't have without you. Would have lost everything if you hadn't shown up with your bare feet and your ridiculous proposal. Wade pulled her into his lap, holding her close. Best business decision I ever made. Best business decision we ever made, Clara corrected, then squealed as he tickled her ribs. Later, lying in bed with Wade's arm around her and moonlight streaming through windows that no longer leaked, Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here, a failed farm in Kansas, a train ride in a livestock car, a town platform where she'd watched a rancher reject his 13th bride, a desperate proposition that should never have worked, and somehow, impossibly, it had worked. More than worked, it had flourished. What are you thinking about? Wade's voice was sleepy but content. 13. Unlucky number 13. Victoria Ashworth. Your 13th rejected bride. Mrs. Fletcher called her unlucky number 13. Clara smiled in the darkness. But she wasn't unlucky. She was just making space for me, for this. Not superstitious, are you? No, but I believe in fate. I believe I was supposed to be on that platform, supposed to witness you turning away someone perfect, so you'd be available when someone real showed up. Clara turned to face him. I believe we were always going to find each other, Wade. Maybe not that exact day or that exact way, but eventually. Wade was quiet for a moment, then pulled her closer. I believe that too. Took 12 wrong women to help me figure out what right looked like. And it looked like a barefoot farm girl who wasn't afraid of hard work or honest truth. 13. Attempts to find a wife. Unlucky for everyone else. Lucky for me. Lucky for us both. They fell asleep like that, wrapped together in the house they'd saved, on the ranch they'd rebuilt, in a marriage that had started as practical necessity and grown into something neither of them had expected. Love is built on partnership. Partnership built on honesty. Honesty built on the understanding that sometimes the best things in life are the ones you build yourself. From nothing but determination and dirt under your fingernails. Years later, when people asked about their marriage, Clara and Wade would tell different parts of the same story. Wade would talk about the day a barefoot woman showed up at his failing ranch and offered him a proposition. Clara would talk about watching a lonely rancher reject his 13th bride and recognizing a kindred spirit. But they both agreed on the important parts. Romance was overrated. Partnership was everything. The fancy women weren't wrong for leaving. They simply knew what they wanted. And it wasn't this life. And sometimes the perfect match is the one nobody expects, the laughingstock rancher and the shoeless farm girl who chose honesty over illusion and built something lasting from the ruins of everyone else's expectations. Their story became legend in Timber Ridge, not because it was romantic, though it was, in its own rough way, but because it was real. In reality, Clara and Wade discovered, was infinitely better than any fantasy. 5 years after Clara walked up that dusty path with a proposition, the Brennan Ranch was thriving. 200 head of cattle, the largest chicken operation in the county, a herd of pigs that turned consistent profit, and a waiting list for Wade Brennan's well-trained horses. Clara stood on the porch, expanded now, with no broken boards watching. Their 3-year-old daughter chased chickens while Wade worked in the corral. Hope, now a mature cow, still followed Clara around like a devoted pet. Mrs. Fletcher had eventually stopped gossiping about them, mostly because the Brennans' success made her look foolish for doubting them. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, travelers would arrive looking for the ranch where the impossible marriage had worked, where a rancher's 13 failures had led to one perfect success. Clara would invite them in, serve them food from her own garden, and tell them the truth. It wasn't magic. It was work. It wasn't fate. It was choice. And it wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone real. The story of Wade and Clara Brennan spread far beyond Timber Ridge, inspiring countless others to look past surface appearances and social expectations, to value partnership over romance, honesty over illusion, and determination over despair. But for the Brennans themselves, none of that mattered. What mattered was this: sunset over their own land, their daughter's laughter, the warmth of each other's hand, and the knowledge that they'd built something lasting from nothing but grit and love and the stubborn refusal to give up. They'd proven everyone wrong, and they'd proven each other right. And that, Clara and Wade agreed, was worth more than all the romance and fancy dresses in the world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.